It was a weekend night in November 2015. My 7-year-old son, Sean, was having a sleepover with 4 of his friends. My wife wasn't home that evening, can't even remember why anymore, but it meant I had to keep a watchful eye on them, though I tried not to make it obvious. They were all crammed into Sean's room, the air buzzing with their laughter, high-pitched screams, and the chaotic rattling of toys. Whenever the noise dipped too low, or when it spiked just a bit too high, I'd quietly step over to the bedroom door and press my ear against it, trying to catch what was happening inside. Maybe that sounds strange, but it was exactly what my wife had told me to do before she left, and if you're a married man, you know better than to ignore your wife's instructions, no matter how small they seem. When it started getting loud again, I padded over to the door, careful not to creak the floorboards, and listened. They were just kids being kids, the sound of Legos clacking together, the crash of plastic bins toppling over, the boys' voices layered over one another in excited, chaotic chatter. Nothing to worry about. I shook my head with a small smile and walked back to the living room, sinking into the couch to watch TV, letting the hum of the screen blend with the distant sounds of their play. Time passed, and then I heard it. A dull, rhythmic thumping coming from Sean's room. I froze, the glow of the television flickering across the walls. Reaching for the remote, I pressed mute, letting the silence stretch out so I could listen. The thumps came again, clearer now, like soft, deliberate taps against one of the windows. I held my breath, trying to figure out what they were up to in there, but after a moment, I told myself it was fine. Let them have their fun, I thought, as long as they weren't breaking anything. I unmuted the TV and tried to sink back into the show, the echo of those soft taps still playing quietly at the edges of my mind. However, it wasn't long before I realized that everything had gone completely silent down the hall in Sean's room. That silence wasn't normal, not with 5 7-year-olds packed into one space. A tight knot formed in my stomach as I sat up straighter, listening. I knew them well enough to know that total silence often meant trouble, or that something had broken and they were waiting to see who would get blamed. Quietly, I crept over to Sean's bedroom door again, pressing my ear against the wood. This time, instead of the usual chaos, I heard soft giggling, low whispers that tangled together in hushed, breathy tones. Something about it didn't sit right, like they were sharing a secret they weren't supposed to have. Curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly turned the doorknob, pushing the door open just enough to peek inside. The 4 boys were sitting cross-legged on the rug, toys scattered everywhere in a colorful chaos of Legos and action figures. Their heads snapped up when they saw me, eyes wide with that guilty look only kids get when they're caught. That's when I noticed it. The window, wide open, letting in the chilly November air that made the curtains sway gently, like slow, ghostly arms. I felt a sharp irritation cut through my nerves. I told Sean to keep the window shut, adding a reminder to keep the noise down, though I kept my voice steady so I wouldn't spook them. They nodded quickly, eyes darting back and forth, and I shut the door. Before heading back to the living room, I ducked into the bathroom. The mirror was fogged at the edges from the heater, and the cold air coming from the hallway made the room feel even smaller. I was about to wash my hands when something caught my eye. A fleeting black shape gliding past the bathroom window. So quick, it almost felt like a trick of the light. My heart skipped. I turned toward the window, but there was nothing there now, just the darkness outside pressing up against the glass. A cold, prickling sensation ran across my shoulders as I stood frozen for a moment, listening. Without thinking, I bolted from the bathroom, the floorboards groaning under my feet, and hurried back to Sean's room. I opened the door sharply, the boys looking up at me in startled silence. "Don't go outside," I told them, my voice low but firm. I tried to keep my expression calm, but inside, a cold dread was beginning to take root, whispering that something wasn't right. That's when it hit me, a cold, nauseating realization that made the air around me feel heavy. There were only 4 boys sitting in the room. There should have been 5. Sean's friend Tom was missing. A rush of panic surged through me, pushing the blood up into my ears as I snapped my gaze around the room, searching for any sign of him. "Where's Tom?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. The boys froze, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes only when they realize they're in trouble. All of them slowly lifted their small arms, pointing toward the open window, the curtains still fluttering in the cold night breeze. Sean's voice was small, almost like he was unsure if he'd done something wrong. He left with the pirate to go find the treasure." For a second, I couldn't move. My stomach twisted so violently, it felt like it was about to tear itself apart. My mind screamed, trying to process what I had just heard, but instinct kicked in before the fear could swallow me whole. There was no way I'd fit through that window, so I turned and bolted out of the room, the hallway rushing past me in a blur. I tore the front door open, the cold November air slamming into me as I scanned the dark street. That's when I saw him. A man holding Tom's tiny hand, calmly walking him toward a car parked along the curb. It was a tan-colored Toyota Corolla, the kind that would blend in anywhere, forgettable in its plainness. My throat burned as I yelled, "Hey, stop!" The man and Tom both turned. The porch light spilled just enough glow for me to see the man's face for the briefest moment before he dropped Tom's hand. Without hesitation, he turned and dove into the car, the engine roaring to life as the tires squealed, tearing off down the quiet suburban street. I sprinted forward and scooped Tom into my arms, holding him tightly against me as I turned back toward the house. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it would break my ribs, and every breath burned in my chest. Back inside, I locked every door and window, the house suddenly feeling too large, too open, too vulnerable. The air was thick with the smell of cold night air and the sweat on my skin. I looked at the boys, huddled together, their eyes wide with the realization that the world wasn't as safe as they had believed just a few hours ago. I wasn't comfortable with the sleepover anymore. I picked up the phone with shaking hands and called every parent, telling them exactly what had happened and urging them to come and take their kids home immediately. They did, one by one, faces pale under the porch light as they took their sons from my doorway. Tom's parents were upset at first, their words sharp, their fear twisting into anger. But in the end, they thanked me, and Tom stayed close friends with Sean, the shadow of that night never fully leaving, but not breaking the bond between them. Later, when everything quieted down, the boys explained what had happened. They said a man had come to Sean's window, knocked softly, and lifted it open himself. He spoke to them in a pirate voice, promising treasure, adventure, and fun, and he asked if one of them would come with him to find it. And Tom did. The part that haunts me, the part that makes it hard to sleep even now, is that it happened right there in my own home, in what I thought was a safe place. And the worst part is that it worked. It was just me, my friend Sarah, and my best friend Canada, trying to figure out what to do and where we could smoke. We were all 15, restless and curious, with that kind of stubborn teenage confidence that makes you think nothing bad will ever really happen. There were woods a short walk from Sarah's house, and since we were all the adventurous type, it felt like the perfect plan. We'd smoke, mess around, and explore the woods. Looking back now, I wish we had just stayed behind Sarah's house, hiding behind the fence, maybe scrolling through scary stories on our phones or watching dumb videos until we were too tired to care. But we didn't. We made it to the opening that led into the woods, the branches overhead rustling in the breeze, the smell of damp earth rising as we stepped onto the trail. We laughed, passing the lighter around, taking turns as the smoke curled up and disappeared into the cold air. It felt like freedom, like we were untouchable, like the whole world was just ours for the night. And I wish the story ended there. From the street, you could clearly see anyone going in or out of those woods. Sarah's neighborhood was nice, the kind where people trimmed their lawns and waved to each other on weekends. But there was one house right beside the woods that never fit in. The woods we were wandering through pressed right up against its backyard. The house was old, slouching under its own weight, the paint on its rusty blue tin siding peeling away in long, tired strips. It looked like something straight out of The Hills Have Eyes, and we used to joke about it whenever we walked by, trying to spook each other with stories about what might live inside. In the backyard, there were pigs, real pigs, snorting around in the dirt and mud, their eyes small and dark whenever they glanced up at you, almost like they were watching, waiting. We were all on the path, heading out of the woods, sticks cracking under our shoes, when we spotted it, a bluish-gray Chevy pickup, sitting there like it was waiting. The engine rumbled to life, the sound cutting through the quiet around us. At first we laughed, joking with each other as we decided to run away from it, pretending it was some dumb horror movie moment we could laugh about later. But the joke stopped being funny really fast. The truck started following us. Every time we slowed down, it slowed down too, crawling along the trail, headlights bouncing between the trees. Whenever we stopped, it stopped, idling there, engine growling low, like it was breathing behind us. That's when we took off running for real. There was a small hill nearby, the kind covered in dead leaves and broken branches, and we scrambled behind it, crouching down so the truck couldn't see us. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and shaky, mixing with the distant rumble of the engine. The truck rolled by slowly, the tires crunching over gravel before it disappeared down the path. We stayed hidden there for a while, just listening, our knees pressed into the cold dirt. When we were sure it was gone, we got up, brushing leaves off ourselves, and started laughing nervously, trying to convince ourselves it was nothing, just some weirdo messing around, just a prank. We started walking toward the exit again, hoping the worst was over. But after about 5 minutes, just as we were getting close to the edge of the woods, everything inside me froze. Headlights were there, blocking the exit, beaming through the darkness and cutting off the trail. The three of us stopped, looking at each other, the fear settling in so heavy it made it hard to breathe. We didn't know what to do. I glanced into the truck, squinting to see through the glare of the lights. There was a man behind the wheel, a larger guy, wearing a hat and a red shirt. That was all I could make out from that distance, but it was enough to send a cold ripple through me. In a panic, Canada reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pocket knife, her hand shaking. But I didn't trust that she'd be able to use it if it came down to it. My hands felt clammy as I reached over and took the knife from her, gripping it tightly, the cold metal grounding me just enough to move. We didn't wait. We turned and ran, tearing back into the woods, branches whipping against us, our feet pounding the dirt and fallen leaves, pushing ourselves deeper into the darkness until we finally felt like we were safe. We waited there for a moment, hidden in the darkness, trying to gather our breath and our thoughts, listening for any sign that the truck was still nearby. When we were sure it was gone, we finally left the woods, cutting across yards until we made it back to Sarah's house, hearts still pounding, hands still shaking. This all happened at the end of our freshman year of high school. Now, we were in the middle of our sophomore year, and we hadn't stepped foot back in those woods for months. We stayed away, even when we joked about going back, even when we told ourselves it was probably nothing. But on September 10th, we went back into the woods one last time. It was Sarah's birthday, and we needed somewhere to smoke, somewhere away from parents and neighbors who might call us out. There were 6 girls and 2 boys this time, so we figured it would be fine, that there was safety in numbers, that there was nothing to worry about. Once we stepped back into the woods, it was like no time had passed, the smell of damp leaves and dirt hitting us immediately, the sounds of our footsteps crunching softly on the trail. We walked for a while, laughing, talking, trying to keep it light. That's when we found the path. Me, Sarah, and Canada had seen it before, a narrow trail twisting off from the main path, but we had never actually gone down it. It had always felt like it was waiting for something, hidden and quiet, tucked away where most people wouldn't notice it. To get to the path, we had to go down a small, steep hill, the dirt loose under our shoes, sliding a little as we made our way down one by one, catching ourselves on tree trunks and reaching for each other's hands so we wouldn't fall. At the bottom, the air felt colder, heavier, like the trees were leaning in closer around us. We moved forward, and soon we came up to a fork in the path, the trail splitting in 2 different directions, each disappearing into the trees. We looked at each other, trying to decide, and then chose to go left. It was a short trail, winding between the trees, leading us to a small building that looked like it had been abandoned before it was ever even finished. The walls were half put together, boards sticking out at odd angles, and the air around it felt dead, like even the wind didn't want to pass through there. There was a wooden ladder leaning against the side, a small fire pit that looked like it hadn't been used in years, the ashes long gone cold. But the strangest thing we found were the saws. Rusted, dirt-caked saws hanging from strings tied from tree to tree, swaying lightly in the breeze, creaking on their cords like some kind of twisted wind chime. We were all stoned, the high making everything feel slightly unreal, like we were moving through a dream we didn't fully understand. Maybe that's why we didn't take what we were seeing as seriously as we should have. We laughed it off, taking turns poking at the saws, hearing them clink together, pretending it was just another weird teenage adventure. Then we decided to check out the right side of the fork in the path, telling ourselves there was no way it could get any weirder. But it did. Not far down that path, we found something that made every bit of laughter drain from our bodies. There, in a small clearing, was a structure that looked like something out of a nightmare. A hangman-like frame, the wood darkened with age, standing crooked against the trees. Lying in the dirt beneath it was a noose, Frayed and dirty, the rope coiled like a dead snake. Nearby, there was an old, worn-out pair of shoes, left there as if someone had stepped out of them and never returned. Next to them was a shovel, half buried in the earth, its handle splintered, the blade rusted, but still sharp. I had never felt so uneasy in my life. The air around us felt heavy, pressing down on us, making every breath feel like it was sticking in our throats. We took pictures of everything, our hands shaking as we tried to steady our phones, the sound of the camera clicks too loud in the quiet clearing. And then we left, quickly, moving as fast as we could back through the trails, up the steep hill and out of the woods, not stopping until we were back on the sidewalk near Sarah's house, the safety of streetlights washing over us like a blessing. I made a promise to myself that day that I would never, ever go back into those woods again. And deep down, we all believed that the man in the pickup truck, the one who chased us through those woods before, had something to do with what we found there. After seeing that noose, those shoes, and that shovel, we were only more grateful that night that he didn't catch us. I'm 27 years old, living alone in a small rural town in Virginia, just 2 blocks away from my parents' house. My parents are both in their 60s now, and my mom, well, she's become the worrying type in her older age. Sometimes she'll walk over to my place uninvited, letting herself in with the spare key I regret ever giving her. It can get pretty annoying, to be honest, like those nights when I'm out really late, either at a bar with friends or spending time with a woman, and I come home to find my mom just sitting there in the living room, waiting, her face all twisted up with worry. I know what you're probably thinking. Oh my God, that's crazy. Why don't you just tell her to stop? But the thing is, you don't know my mom. It's hard to explain, but she's this worrisome, sweet, innocent little lady that you just can't bring yourself to go against, no matter how much you want to. And I hate to even say it, but she's also dealing with mild dementia, which just makes everything more complicated. Anyway, this was on a Saturday night, and I think it was around 2 in the morning. I had been out at a dive bar with a group of college friends, the only real place to hang out in this boring town, if you can even call it that. And I was getting ready to head home. We said our goodbyes outside, the cold night air making everything feel sharper, clearer, and I started walking the 3 blocks back to my house, the streetlights humming above me, the sound of my footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk. I stumbled up my front stoop in a drunken haze, the cool night air nipping at my skin, and dug around in my pocket for my keys, the metal jingling softly as I fumbled with them. But when I reached out and grabbed the doorknob, I felt it turn easily in my hand. It was unlocked. My mom was here again. I let out a quiet sigh, pushing the door open slowly, careful not to let it creak too loud, and then shut it softly behind me, turning the lock with a small click. The house felt too still, the air inside holding on to the cold from outside, and the faint scent of home, old wood, coffee, something sweet, lingered as I walked into the kitchen. I tossed my keys onto the counter, the sound breaking the quiet, and that's when I noticed the note. It was written in my mom's handwriting, careful, the letters slightly shaky in that way they get sometimes now. You forgot this at our house. It was sitting next to a box of half-eaten cake, the kind of leftovers my parents never really wanted but never threw away. I didn't see my mom anywhere, so I figured she must have gone upstairs to sleep in the guest bed while she waited for me to get home, something she'd done before, especially when she was feeling particularly anxious. It was just her way, I told myself, even if it made me feel like a kid all over again. Then I heard it. footsteps upstairs. They were soft but steady, creaking across the floorboards, moving in that slow, careful way my mom did when she thought she was being quiet. I let out another sigh, heavier this time, rubbing a hand over my face. Almost 3 in the morning, and there I was, 27 years old, and she still had to wait up for me, hovering over me like I was a teenager sneaking in late after curfew. I walked up the stairs, the railing cool under my hand, the footsteps above me still moving. When I reached the top, I headed straight for the guest room, expecting to see her curled up there under the blanket. But the bed was empty. The blanket was still perfectly in place, and there was no sign of her. I checked the bathrooms one by one, pushing open the doors, flicking on the lights. Nothing. Empty. A tight, cold feeling started to coil in my chest, and I could feel my heart beating a little too hard. I was afraid that my mom was having one of her episodes again, wandering around, confused and scared in the middle of the night. I rushed back downstairs, grabbed the phone off the counter, and with shaking hands, I dialed my dad's number. After 4 rings, my dad finally picked up, his voice groggy and rough, mumbling, "What the hell is the matter?" I tried to steady my breathing, swallowing hard as I told him I could hear Mom wandering around upstairs in my house. There was a pause on the other end, the silence stretching so long it felt like the world had gone still. And then he said, his voice clearer now, "That's not possible. She's sleeping right next to me." My mouth fell open, the words caught in my throat as I turned my head slowly to look toward the darkened stairs. The kitchen light barely reached the top, leaving everything cloaked in heavy shadow. But in that faint sliver of light, I saw it. A head, peeking around the corner at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I couldn't see the face, just the pale shape of it, half hidden, watching. A scream ripped out of me, raw and sharp, echoing into the phone as I dropped it and bolted for the door. I tore it open, stumbling down the steps and out into the cold night, feet pounding the pavement as I ran down the street toward my parents' house, the darkness pressing in around me. As I ran, I grabbed the phone, my voice shaking as I tried to explain to my dad what I had seen, what was in the house, telling him everything in a breathless rush. About halfway there, I heard him take a breath and say, "All right, I'm going to call the cops." And then the line went dead. I kept running, my lungs burning, the cold air sharp in my throat, until I finally reached my parents' house. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow onto the yard, and there, standing in the doorway, was my mom, her face pale and worried, her hands twisting in front of her. She pulled me inside, her eyes searching mine, her voice soft and shaky as she tried to calm me down. She explained that yes, she had come over earlier that day to clean up my kitchen a bit and to drop off the cake they didn't want. 2 police cars pulled up in front of my parents' house, the red and blue lights flashing across the windows, painting the living room walls with restless color. The officers stepped out, their radios crackling softly, and they escorted me and my dad down the street toward my house, the walk feeling longer than it ever had before. When we got there, one officer stayed outside with us, his flashlight cutting across the yard, while 2 others went inside to investigate. The front door was still unlocked, and it felt wrong seeing it like that, hanging open as they stepped through. It felt like 15 minutes stretched into an hour as we waited outside in the cold, my breath fogging in the air, my dad's hand resting heavily on my shoulder, grounding me, but not enough to ease the tightness in my chest. Finally, the officers came back out, one of them pulling off his gloves as he told us it was clear. They had checked everything, the crawl space, the attic, every closet and corner where someone might hide. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no fingerprints. There was really nothing for me to report, other than the fact the door was left unlocked and I saw the outline of a head at the top of the stairs before I ran for it. They nodded, trying to reassure me, telling me to keep the doors locked and to call if anything else happened. But still, I didn't feel safe sleeping there that night. So I went back to my parents' house, the warmth of the living room wrapping around me as I sank into the couch, the lights on, the familiar sounds of my parents moving around in the kitchen, making it easier to breathe. Me and my dad are certain that my mom simply forgot to lock the door when she left, her memory slipping more and more over the past few months. Since that night, my dad has started stopping her from coming over alone, making sure she's never by herself when she leaves the house. It makes me feel both sad and relieved at the same time. Some nights, though, when the house is quiet and the shadows stretch long across the floors, I still get that feeling, the prickling on the back of my neck, the sense that someone is watching, waiting, hidden just out of sight. And sometimes I can't shake the thought that whoever or whatever was in my house that night never really left, that they're still here, somewhere, hiding in the dark, waiting.